I'm up here to kind of help Lindsay or troubleshoot or just ask questions. Go ahead and introduce yourself, guys.
I'm Stan Berkowitz. You probably know me as a writer for a lot of the DC animated stuff. And this is
Riba. I directed a bunch of the DC AU, as we call it, stuff. And I was originally a designer on Batman the Animated Series, and then graduated to directing, and pretty much directed from Batman all the way to Justice League Unlimited.
Okay, I usually like to kick off like kind of what is your origin story? How did you get into animation and filmmaking? And would love to know a little bit of your backstory.
getting into animation happened after I was working in live action. It's a show called Superboy, 1990, 1991. And I'd been hired to do that. And then one of the writers from Superboy, you probably have heard the name J.M. Mattis. He recommended me for a job writing for Spider-Man and Stan Lee. And while I was back to Spider-Man for about 2 years, and then switched over to DC. So that's how I got into it.
I've been drawing all my life. My brother introduced me to comic books when I was a child, so I was hooked. I loved Batman all my life, Superman, George Reeves, the whole deal, and cartoons. All I did was watch cartoons and draw. So I was primed. I was ready. I went to school of visual arts to learn how to make comics, and Will Eisner was teaching there, Art Spiegelman, Harvey Kurtzman. It was a golden age. It was amazing, and so I came out of there and started. The very first thing I worked in animation was Winnie the Pooh. And then I got a job at Ruby Spears doing storyboards, and the shows were awful, but the crew was amazing. There was so much talent. Doug Wildey, who created Johnny Quest, my favorite show as a kid. There, Jack Kirby was designing for us. That was like an amazing dream job, working on crap with amazing people, and then kind of learning the ropes there. And then from that I went on to Kid Video, Ghostbusters, and Batman, and that changed my life. It's pretty much my origin.
So, what was like the early working relationship between you two? How did you guys meet, and what were those early stages with the collaboration?
I wrote, he directed. I mean, it was as simple as that. There isn't that much interaction. The writer finishes the script, and then the director takes it over and figures out how to visualize it.
That's pretty much it. Like, there would be times when we'd interact and stuff.
Voice recordings.
Voice recordings, exactly. But we were always happy to get Stan scripts because they were always special. There was always some humanity in there, and there was always a cool darkness to some of the stories. There was always a pleasure.
I put all the humanity in the scripts, so I don't have any left.
Okay, so like DC, everything is kind of a pre-existing IP. What's it like to take on that role of kind of reimagining something or taking your spin on something, and what was going through your mind whenever you were beginning that process?
Because the thing already existed.
Yeah.
I guess this is probably true for Dan too. When we grew up, we're watching stuff that wasn't very good. I mean, as a 3-year-old, I liked the George Reeves Superman. But as a 10-year-old, seeing the Batman serial from the 1940s, yeah, exactly. I honestly felt that the people who made, certainly the 1949 serial, had contempt for their audience. Let's do it quickly, get it done, do it cheap, and who cares what the kids think, because they're going to watch it anyway. And I don't think that when we came aboard to do this stuff, I think we were trying to do it right. to do what we would have liked had we, if we were children. And I think it worked out. Is that true for you too?
Absolutely.
And that's why it's still valid entertainment material now. And why you're laughing at the 1949 Batman.
When I was 5, the Adam West Batman show was real. It wasn't a comedy. I took it seriously. And there are aspects of it that still play as an adaptation of the character. It is technically the most accurate adaptation of the comic book of that era that exists on film, on live action. But, we really wanted to do something that honored the character, the spirit of the character, the way that we always wanted him to be. And we were doing it for kids, so we couldn't go overboard in terms of violence. So and it actually helped, I think. I think it worked in our favor to have a few limitations, to not have to go into the real dark realm.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't kill people. You couldn't even, when I worked on Spider-Man, we couldn't even say the word kill. So you'd have to say, I'll destroy him, lines like that, that just didn't sound proper.
Like, did you want to go in that direction, or do you, like, yes?
It's like they're threatening, and we had gangsters on Batman, obviously they're trying to kill people. But we couldn't really, with the Joker, he attacks and kills people, but we couldn't do that per se. So we had to leave them sort of breathing when they were left.
There was an evolution in censorship. Fox, I feel, was the tightest in terms of censorship. You can't have a realistic gun. Even though Batman did an episode about a gun, right?
No, actually, they didn't that Tom Rucker wrote one. I don't think they didn't.
What happened with it? They tried to do it.
They said no, yeah.
That's because it's Fox.
Yeah.
Then when the shows went over to the
CW. Was WB at the time?
The kids WB, it eased up a little bit.
Well, it eased up because of one thing, is that our standards and practices were not real. They were like Gene's secretary, who's never done the job before. They didn't know what they weren't supposed to do. And so they let us get away with
yeah, but in all honesty, when the censorship is very tight, what you try to do is get around it and trick people and do something foul and obscene that the censors don't understand. But when the censor is a reasonable person, we respect that, and there's a cooperation. And then continue the evolution. Justice League, which I hope you saw, was for Cartoon Network, and there was nothing, no censorship. And they trusted us, and I don't think we abused that trust at all when we worked for Cartoon Network. So that was just heavenly. I mean, right at the beginning of it, the thing with Aquaman, right at the beginning there was an Aquaman strip, and it was the origin story where he loses his hand because he's in a trap. He literally has to cut off his own hand to get out of the trap. The censor from Cartoon Network said, "Are you going to show him cutting off his own hand, like on screen?" And we said, "No, we didn't. We wouldn't do that." They went, "Fine." Then we never heard from them again. So there was that trust.
And we, and again, sneaky. We were sneaky. And we knew that there was issues with blood, but you can't cut off a man's hand without showing some kind of blood. So we made the baby blankets, because he's saving his baby, he cuts off his hand. We made them red. Very royal red, so that he takes it to wrap his stump around, and it ended up being a big red stump that looked, it looked like it was bloodiness, but no, it was a red.
I was curious, because animation is kind of such a grueling profession, in my opinion. What kind of long nights could you remember? Or is there a time where you had the toughest sort of project or deadline or something like that? You could remember?
Everyone.
Every Is there a memorable one? Or a reason for why it just couldn't go through? Or
There were stuff where just the board artist didn't finish it or didn't get it done, and you have to kind of go in and pull it off and do it. I couldn't find somebody to do the tail end of the main man episode, the first one, and I boarded the last act myself. So, and I did it in a weekend. So.
Yeah, I didn't know about this. I mean, the writers, we just went home at 6 o'clock. In live action, it's not that way, but in animation, the deadlines can't be that tight.
Yeah.
So, we go home before Dan.
Yeah, we were just, and also, when I first started on the show too, I was inheriting the directing job from Dick Sebast, and he left me with half of a board of Satana to finish, and finish the layouts on What is Reality, the Riddler show. So I was correcting layouts, stacks of layouts, and there was, and here's the exposure sheets for you to go through for some other show that I had to go. So I did stacks of all this stuff, and it was right up from the get-go. It was like, wow, just throw them right into the deep end. But it was cool. It's like you learn the process. This is the way it's done. This is the way we do it.
Did it ever ease up to the point where you could
Some
feel like it was
shows,
almost
some
60?
shows, because you had, like, when I was, Ronnie Del Carmen board stuff, and we had some really phenomenal storyboard artists working on the show, so I only had to work on a little bit here and there, little bits, and that was just, and when we got the layout department, sorry, they were great, some of them were fantastic, and we promoted all the ones, but it was just so hard to do the layouts as well, and then, so the Japanese crew said that it's too complicated to describe, but they started taking up the layouts, and we didn't have to worry about that as much, so it was a lot of our play.
I have to clarify something. Storyboards kind of look like comic books, but they're crude versions of comic books. They're done in black and white, and they're designed to show the animators what they have to do. Sometimes those storyboards are done in America, and other times they're, once the script is done, the script is just sent right to a Japanese animation studio. And I'm not sure why this script would go to Japan for a storyboard and why that one would stay in America.
There wasn't a rhyme or reason per se. There were some though that we decided, no, this should go to the Japanese crew. I don't know why it happened, but just logistics mostly. But like we wanted to keep the dark side stuff here because we really understood that dynamic better than they did. But they ended up doing the human show, which was phenomenal. It didn't look enough like Kirby to some degree, but it still looked great, and they kind of tried to evoke a lot of the Kirbyism stuff. It was great. Yeah, for Superman, when we got rid of our layout crew, we needed a bigger crew to do the show because we had a shorter time frame. Because Batman had like a 1.5 lead time. Superman did not. So we hired TMS, the greatest animation studio on the planet at that time.
In Japan.
In Japan. And they brought people out to work on the show. And these are like phenomenal, top animators and directors, people who work I didn't realize I knew from being a fan of Japanese animation, that the woman that animated on Castle Cagliostro, Miyazaki, she actually was one of our directors. And it was like I just fell down on my knees and started yelling. She was amazing. And we were so lucky to have these people on our show.
So when we got the Emmy Award, the group that we knew from LA showed up. Then there are all these people we knew from Japan who are out there. They're getting their awards too. It's like,
and they deserve it.
we didn't even know.
Yeah.
They're excellent artists.
Yeah. And so, and it actually, like people ask why we redesigned Batman for the New Adventures, because we learned a lot from working with PMS. And so they taught us a little bit more about the process in terms of how to streamline the animation for the overseas purpose. So Superman, the New Adventures of Batman got a little bit streamlined to help facilitate the animation to make it better and more consistent. So, and then some of it was just taste. Some of it was just like, I want to mix this up and make it. It was a little bit of that too.
Awesome. Could you talk about kind of the challenges for writing for superheroes as opposed to like normal characters that don't have powers, and the difficulties or I don't know, the abilities maybe they play into the writing or creating for these characters, given the circumstances of the powers and everything?
It's the difference between Superman and Batman. Batman's easy to write for because he has vulnerability. Superman has fewer vulnerabilities, and it's very hard to figure out jeopardy for him. The old George Reeves TV show would constantly put Jimmy and Lois in jeopardy, or maybe Inspector Anderson, somebody like that. And that's how they chose to deal with Superman's vulnerability. For us, we didn't really do it that much because it seemed kind of melodramatic by 1996. But yeah, it's much harder to find vulnerability. So early on, a guy named Paul Levitz, who was the editor-in-chief at DC Comics, took the Superman writers to lunch and gave us some advice on how to do Superman stories, because in comic books he was running into the same problems that we were in animation. And one of his suggestions was give Clark a problem that affects Superman's life. And the minute he said that, I thought, well, Clark gets killed. And that became the episode called The Late Mr. Kent. And it was things like that where you have to really think pretty hard about finding a way into the story. You can't just have to fight. When I worked on Superboy, we have novice writers saying, well, how about Superman fights a mummy? And the response is, and then what? Because there's no story there at all. And a fight by itself just isn't that interesting. Which leads to the Promethean, which is the only episode of Superman that I regret having worked on, because it's a fight. It's just Superman has a fight. We were inspired by the Fleischer cartoons, which I'm sure you know. And
Jack Kirby. The Promethean image is taken from
the big monster.
Yeah, the big monster.
So he has a fight with a big monster, and then there's a final sequence that I wrote that never got shot. So. But it's tough.
But the interesting thing is about that show is that it introduced the general.
My buddy Charles Napier.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing, because I always I wanted to have a character in there, or at least more, that's not necessarily a villain, but people that don't trust Superman. Because it's like you don't think everybody would just think he's the greatest guy, because people would fear him. And yet you don't want to do a whole show, you want everybody to fear him. But having military guy. Sure, that makes sense. That he wouldn't, the general wouldn't trust him.
Gee, do you think Pete Hegseth would trust Superman? As long as he stays clean shaven.
Okay, well, you've got your book here. I'd love to know kind of like what drove to the book, and what's it like going from working on animation, but now you're working on the book, and what's the difference in your collaboration there?
Well, the collaboration was, so I wrote it, and then I asked Dan to illustrate it, and he did a great job. And the book is a series of essays. It's not something you have to read from page 1 to the end of the order. It's more like a magazine. It's a series of essays, and it's about writing for superheroes, and writing in general, and sometimes life in general. So that's the book. Dan and I are at a booth called Heroic Fine Art on the 1100 row, and if we don't answer a question you have today, please come by. We'll be there the rest of the day and also tomorrow. Heroic Fine Art, row number 1100.
Yeah.
Okay. 1153. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So 1153. Yeah, you heard that here. Okay, so we love to engage and do Q&A as well. So answer or questions from the crowd. We'd definitely love to hear from you guys.
When Batman the Animated Series first came out, the animation was extremely different than anything else in America. Did you get any feedback from that type of style of animation, good or bad?
What kind of feedback, from who? What feedback are you talking about?
Well, when I saw it as a kid, it was different than all the other cartoons out there.
By different, you mean better?
But we weren't sure, you didn't say that.
It was just something that I've never seen in America, and once you saw a few episodes, it really caught on. I was just wondering if you got any.
Well, I mean, I would wear my crew jacket to the supermarket, and and I could get mothers telling me, "Thank you for making a show that I can watch along with my child." So that was the first time I'd heard, okay, adults watch the show too.
Didn't you get a sense that it was inspired by the Fleischer Superman cartoons at all?
Did you know what those were?
Yeah.
I mean, you were a kid though.
Yeah.
So it wasn't completely different.
It was just definitely different, the style. I've never seen it before.
Yeah, because it was given a big budget.
Yeah, and also,
The studio and the network were really behind it.
but there's also another thing, and I can't give this man credit enough, but he gets a lot of credit already, but I'm gonna give him some more. But Bruce Timm really like solidified this style, how to animate something simply but dramatically. His inspirations were Jack Kirby, Harvey Kurtzman, and Wally Wood in comics. But also in animation, he had worked for Don Bluth. He was an in-betweener, and I'd worked with him a little bit of deep, and he really hated the designs, but he was working on stuff because it was too complicated. He wanted to simplify stuff, because he knew how hard it was to animate overseas, because he had been an in-betweener. So when he, it's like, if I get the call with shots, I'm gonna make a show that can be animated. And that's what he did. So that helped a lot. And then Jean McCurdy gave the edict that she wanted a show to look like the Fleischer, and she wanted a show to look like the Fleischer cartoons. And that was, oh my gosh, I love those ever since I was 14. I wanted to make a Batman cartoon that looked like the Fleischer cartoons since I was 14. So to actually have the chance to work on it was.
It was a great call.
Oh.
I saw something.
What was it like switching from Batman the Animated Series to Batman Beyond? The difference in storytelling and visualization and bringing back the Joker. What was that like? Was it difficult? Was it easy? Was it?
It was interesting because they had just canceled Batman and Superman. We were on that show for a long time. We kind of got in a groove, and they wanted a teenage Batman. So we didn't know what that was. Bruce and Alan kind of hashed this thing out with Paul and figured out like having a new Batman in the future. Bruce Wayne being his mentor, and we were just sort of thrown into it because it had to hit the air in September. So this idea of like, oh, gee, what is it like? I don't know, because we were just all working together to do a new thing and do it as good as we did it before, but do something different and interesting, and give the network what they wanted, a teenage Batman, but still make it true to the character, to make it feel canon, to make it feel legitimate, to really like honor the spirit of Batman. So it was a fun challenge. And we were, artists were drawing stuff, handing it to writers. Stan would come up with,
Yeah, the villains were created by the artists. Usually it's not that, it doesn't work that way, but there's a character called Shriek who manipulates sound, and I got a picture of it, and Alan Burnett, my boss, just said, here, this guy has something to do with sound.
And it was like a script, and you're like, oh, that's what this, excellent, now I got it. And the ink was like that, you want a Clayface type power, but different, and how about a female version, and how about something, and James Tucker came up with the design for ink, it was so awesome.
And then Hillary
fleshed it out. And then, yeah, exactly, and I blended Curare, and we were like, oh, she's some, the assassin character. We don't even know. Well, she isn't here. She's blue. And she's got and that was like the whole thing.
Spellbinder.
Spellbinder. Yeah, but the thing about Spellbinder was that there is a DC character called Spellbinder, and we created our own and kind of like went, oh, you know what? It's similar to something that already exists, but we're leaning into it because we never did them on the old show. So it's like, okay, well, maybe it's Spellbinder. It's okay. And I was like, the only thing we had was to not make direct sequels of old characters. Not, and we did violate that a few times with characters that made sense. Mr. Freeze. Did you write that up? No? Okay. The Bane came back, we had things like that. And all these stories that kind of would make sense for like handoff, like what happened to these characters. But we didn't want to like touch on the Joker. We didn't want to touch on Catwoman, Riddler, any of the other characters, because we didn't want to make the show feel too much like reliant on the original. So,
And they would have been really old too.
yeah,
That's how, yeah.
The guy did all, he suffered it.
yes.
Kind of
going on a little bit further with the last question, did you guys have any difficulties or challenges writing for Bruce in Batman Beyond? Because he's taken a mentor role before, and this is one of the earlier times we actually get to see him give up the mantle of Batman to somebody else, but willingly give it up, rather than somebody else taking the mantle of Batman.
Was it a problem doing that? No. I mean, it was fun, actually, because he'd been so used to being almost all-powerful, and to take that away from him, and he resented it, and he had, I think, a really fun relationship with Terry. It was a lot of fun to write that relationship, because they're kind of testy with each other sometimes, and then they really do care about each other, and it was a lot of fun to write that, and very easy for me anyway.
And also for the voice acting, like for Kevin Conroy, it was a shift, because he was used to being in focus. It was like, it was him, and now he had to share it with a young actor. So there was a lot of similarity in the recording booth. Will and Kevin just bonded really well, and he really was a mentor to him. So this relationship that we see on screen is actually kind of very close to what their relationship was off campus. Robin.
How do you feel about the fact that the art that you created wasn't just so popular at the time, but has this amazing legacy?
I love it. I mean, what can I say? It's like I kind of always knew that it was going to last forever because I said so. There's an interview with me in some either Cinefantastique or one of these some magazine, and I said something along the lines of I think it's wonderful to work on something that'll last forever. And I said that, and I meant it, but I didn't know that this would still be this popular, at this stage. I mean, I knew people would remember it the way I remember Johnny Quest, the way I remember Fawn shows that, I liked when I was a kid. But the fact that it just keeps growing and people hand it off to their children and sometimes grandchildren, it's like this one thing. We're seeing this, and that is the part that, like, wow, I didn't see the extent of what I meant. It's like, now I'm seeing it. It's amazing.
Yeah, looking over the whole continuity between the shows, what was a story that you regret not getting to tell?
I actually have one. It was where Superman decides to stop the war. Like the wars in the Balkans, and Clark Kent is sent to cover it, and he tries to do it, and ultimately at the end he can. Happily, when Dwayne McDuffie went over to Ben 10, I was able to do a version of that story. I don't know if you remember it, but it's set on a different, distant planet, and the two tribes, one's blue and one's red, and they're fighting each other. Ben tries to stop it, and the minute he leaves, they go right back into it. No regret there.
I wanted to do Swamp Thing, and we weren't allowed to because the Vertigo had a lock on that character, so we weren't allowed to use Vertigo characters. So that was kind of like, ooh, that would have been fun.
Yeah.
From each of your perspectives, based on what you do, what was your favorite episode, whether you wrote it or you drew it? What was and why?
You go first.
There's an episode that involved an alternate version of Justice League called A Better World, where their version of the Justice League took over their world and became dictators, but kind of soft dictators, where they weren't beating people in the streets or anything, but people were scared. And now, of course, I have regrets, because sometimes, when you present something for children, there are reasons for not giving kids certain things to think about. Often the death of a parent, of course, Batman, his parents died. The question that I would ask you is, would you trade liberty for security? That was something that came up during the Constitutional Convention here in America, and it's something we're thinking about. Problem is that children, you know, if young Bruce Wayne were offered the choice between living in a dictatorship with his parents still alive or living in freedom with his parents dead, I think a little child would say, no, I want my parents. And I worry now that I shouldn't have brought up the whole idea of authoritarianism. For obvious reasons, if you watch the news.
You know, that episode really resonates, and it was one of those ones that really it was a catalyst for so much more afterwards, because it didn't just sit there. Those questions keep going on and on and on. So it was reflected in Justice League later on. I mean, later on in the Justice League Unlimited series. So it was, you know, that was a pretty special episode. I have lots of favorites that don't relate to like the actual shows themselves, but recordings and stuff like that. So each series has like a favorite thing. You know, I have favorites on Superman because I knew Jack Kirby getting to work with his characters was like a dream. The recording of the Great Brain Robbery was the most fun I've ever had at a record. And the Mixes Privilege show, I love that original take on Mixie, and the fact that we got to do that was a blast. So I have lots of favorites. So. But Better World is among them. It's really one of the most special shows.
The origin of that was a Superboy episode I did in 1990 called Road Not Taken, where you go to an alternate world and there's a Superboy or Superman character who was raised to become a dictator. The difference between the two is that in that one, the Superboy character, we call him the Sovereign, he's an asshole from day one. From the moment he's born, and children watching that show go, that guy's a jerk, I never would want to have that guy as a leader. In the Justice Lord story, those heroes were our heroes who made one bad decision and then a whole bunch of other bad decisions followed. And that, you know, them not being assholes to start with, it made the show a little bit more difficult for children to view, I think.
It's a complicated show. And what originally, I mean, that what you said is correct about the Superboy thing, but originally the premise of doing the Crime Syndicate was presented.
Yes.
And Bruce was very like, no, I don't want to do it.
I felt the same way.
Where a world where good is bad and bad is good, it doesn't make any sense. It's not even like Star Trek, the mirror universe that kind of like makes sense. But this is like, no, we can't just, no, that doesn't make sense. I can't do that show. And this presented a more interesting way of showing an alternate version of the characters as evil, because they're not evil. They just made choices that are different from us.
And they became evil.
And they became evil.
They became dictators.
Yeah. So it's more nuanced, it's a very complicated show. And the fact that the question sees oh my gosh, it's so cool.
All right, good question. Maybe someone in the back left, or hands in the back there. Yeah.
I was just going to bring up that a while back, the WB showed stills for a Batman Beyond movie. What would you want the Batman Beyond movie to be? Like, what would the story be if you didn't have limitations with vertical characters or things like that? What would you want Terry McGinnis' story to be if it ever got to the big screen?
Well, wouldn't it have to be the origin story?
It kind of would have to be. We have to explain it again for people who are not familiar. I mean, and by the way, that whole thing about the show, that movie being canceled, it's actually not true. It was somebody presented that, very talented animators presented it to Warner Brothers. So it wasn't a thing that actually existed. It was somebody kind of doing it on their own, presenting it to Warner's, and they don't take people's outside input, you know, they don't do that. So it wasn't ever canceled. It was just, they just didn't choose to do it. But there was a live action version back while we were on the show that was in the works that Alan and Paul did with. And that didn't
I don't know why, no one said why. I mean, you know, when the treatment goes out, people read it over the week and they go, no, that's all they got. Not even like, well, if you change this, if you change that, nothing. It's just like,
I think the director had input and he wanted to change things, and then his movie came out and it didn't do that. So the studio didn't want to put all their faith in the director with the movie, that his previous movie wasn't a hit. He had done a movie before that had done well, but that.
I remember the Titans. Remember the Titans.
And then the one that he was working with, and they were like, no, let's not put all our faith in the guy, you know. And then he was kind of waffling about it, so he was like, oh, so, yeah.
You know, considering the crap they do, they do green light.
It's great.
Back in the Superman, sure.
So I'm thinking like about how I think each pairing, like Superman and Lois, kind of has their own like little flavor to each one. But what were you remember the thoughts that were kind of had when you were developing Lois's character for the animated series, and how you wanted her and Clark and Superman's relationships to play off of each other?
World's finest, right?
Yeah.
Where they kind of, the two couples cross.
Yep.
And again, going back to a better world where Superman, basically, you know, the dictator Superman still has Lois as his girlfriend, but she's also his prisoner. So those are some narratives.
In terms of what, I'm trying to, the question, like what, how to make her different in their relationship, is that what you're?
Not really. I just feel like an environment that is.
Because what I mean, essentially, like we kind of wanted to play her very much like a 40s, you know, that sort of what was the movie that I forgot the most of?
Oh, His Girl Friday.
His Girl Friday, you know, front page, that kind of thing, where it's like it's a very 40s kind of, you know, take on the female reporter, feisty, tough, and Dana just like really nails that. She's so good, and she so much loves Noir. And I mean, you've seen her on TCM interviewed by Andy Muller. She's like really into that, and she really evokes that with her voice. She's reading Lois like one of those characters from the voice. She's wonderful, and that kind of helps a lot because it's not. She's never really the damsel in distress, even when she's in trouble. You know, which was like kind of why I like those Coates as the live action Superman Lois, because she was like a tough, you know,
As opposed to Noel Neal.
she was sweet. I loved Noel Neal as a child, but she was so sweet.
Those two actresses hated each other. I asked Noel Neal about that.
Yeah, no.
I don't talk about her.
Yeah, she
They're in their 90s.
But she really said something to somebody that she heard. She said something like, "I wish I'd hired an actress." And we all kept heard that. So that was the catalyst.
I hired Noel Neal to be on Super Bowl.
She was great.
I know.
But I like her.
Well, it was different from the Fleischer Lois Lane, because she was always in trouble. He was always rescuing her.
Yes, and she was like insane. I mean, I gotta take a picture inside this dinosaur's mouth. Stay here. No, tickling.
Question on the left of the hat.
With all the variations and the evolution of the shows that you guys worked on, was there one that stood out to you that you really enjoyed more when version of these characters that you enjoyed more than any of the others? I mean, like Animated or Beyond or
You know, it's like all your children. You really like all of them. I mean, you know, it's like, is there any iteration? You know what, here's the thing. When I was 3 years old and New York Batman came out, the yellow oval around Batman, I hated that because my brother hated it. He's like, he's not Bat Signal, man. He's Batman. So I always hated drawing the oval around it. All my life, I hated that oval, even though Adam West had it. And so when we got the Liberation to like and we could change this. I mean, boy, when we did the flashback and Robin's reckoning and he didn't have that anymore, I was like, yes, it's the real Batman. And when I did the Dick Sprang and the Frank Miller, those were really cool to actually adapt the comics that I had read. I'm not old enough to read Dick Sprang, but I had a lot of the reprints when I was little. So those things were like, that was my Batman. That was, so yeah, I mean, that's it. But I love them all,
Static Shock was fun to write at first, and then the censors got a little tighter, and it took a lot of the fun away from it. That was probably the only one where I felt that when Rich Vogel came along and dropped by my office and said, "Hey, you want to work for Justice League and get up and get away from Static Shock?" I went, "Yeah, okay, today."
Oh, and there's one thing, the Superman that never was. When Bruce was just developing Superman, he wanted to do the original Fleischer take on it. And his designs were so beautiful. They were so classic, 40s style. And the second that Warner Brothers, both Warner Brothers and DC looked at it and they said, no way. They said, no, we don't want it to look like an offshoot of Batman. We don't want it to feel like it's in the same world as Batman. And we want something fresh and something different. And so he redesigned the Superman to feel, still strong. It was great. It was a good classic Superman, but it was, just a little. It wasn't as, somehow it didn't feel as iconic to me because that wasn't the Superman that I kind of, was hoping to see. The Fleischer Superman was like my favorite thing. But it actually helped us because I think the Kirby stuff that we introduced, Darkseid, Orion, all those villains, all that stuff worked better with the new design. It wouldn't have worked as well with the 40s design.
Couple of questions?
I guess I'm just curious, because I love that animated series, I always have found the show fun. Is there a reason for the change, I guess, in the darker tone from animated series to the Batman movie? I felt like between the design, between even the combat sequences, everything felt a bit more just brutal.
Is there a reason?
Yeah.
Yes. There was a pause between the series. There's people, they get the DVDs and they don't understand the chronology. There's 3 years passing between the original Batman and the New Adventures. We did Superman in between. And in fact, some of us did Freakazoid and then Superman. So there was a lag there in time. And a new network.
And new writers, too.
New writers?
Well, you still had Alan Burnett and Paul Dini.
Well, Hillary and
Me, and Bob Goodman. So yeah, we had new writers with perhaps a darker sensibility.
And so, and also, I mean, we also wanted to push the envelope to things that we hadn't done before. So we're adapting, we, as a crew, we did this holiday comic that won an Eisner. And the very first episode was an adaptation of that, which was really kind of cool to do because it was a thing that the crew had done. And so it was a really fun, Holiday Nights was a really fun show. And then, we kind of, it was neat, but then Over the Edge. It's being the darkest episode ever. And that was, wow, really insanely dark. And I'll tell you a story. There's a scene when Barbara Gordon falls off the building and hits Commissioner Gordon's police car. But board originally, because it was just a TMS episode, we were boarding it. As it was boarded originally, she hits the car from the outside while I'm looking at the hood. And Alan Burnett said, "No, we can't show this." We didn't even take it to the network. It was like, the censor just, they're going to go crazy when they see this and they're probably going to kill the show. We can't do this. We got to find a way to obscure it. And Bruce was like, "Oh, I get it. We'll show it from the inside." That was and of course, when it was boarded and when they animated it, it was the most horrific thing that you could possibly imagine. 10,000 times worse than what was originally boarded. But it was great.
Oh, we probably have time for 2 more questions.
Based on your history in the industry, what do you think about the future of the half-hour animated series and television or?
last thing I did was 15 minutes, and people's attention spans are just getting shorter and shorter and smaller and smaller. And you go to movies now, movie theaters, and people are sitting there with their phones and stuff. So, real short stuff.
Yeah, I don't, you know, it's like, I don't know what to say. I really don't. It's like, I'm not a part of it. It's, the world is different now. You know, you have to ask James Gunn what they want to do. I like this stuff, actually. I do like a lot of the stuff. The new Superman, the anime Superman is kind of charming. It's a cute show. It's well written. And it's a fun new take. It's a different world from what we were doing. But it's like, it's taking like young people today are watching a lot of anime and absorbing, and we were too, but we were doing it in a way that felt more like Western animation. And you know, it's a little different world now. The quality of the animation I think is different, and you know, I don't want to say inferior, but different. and we were really lucky to have like the best animation studio in the world, and pay them enough to do the job well. And we were really lucky. The stars all aligned, lightning in a bottle. You know, I don't think that will ever come back, but I think there will be new golden ages of different sorts in the future. You know? So it's up to young people.
Okay, let me see, I think we have time for, no, I think that's time, so.
Thank you all for showing up.
Thank you, guys.